everyone? Thanks for tuning in today for another episode of Niners News here on 49ers Hive. My name is Zach Hernandez. I'm joined by co-host Matt Llewellyn, and today we are going to be talking about some recent updates in Raheem Mostert's contract situation. Matt, today it was announced Raheem Mostert and the 49ers agreed to restructure his deal. I do not believe the specifics have been announced yet, but what are your initial thoughts on this whole situation?
Yeah, I guess it was kind of reported that they added some, bonus and some incentives to the contract to kind of flesh out some of the value. It's a little surprising to me that they kind of bent on this. They didn't really have to. And what I'm guessing is when all the numbers really come out, what'll have happened is it'll have freed up a little bit of extra cap space for maybe George Kittle to be signed. I know that the team just didn't do this out of the goodness of their heart. I know that Raheem has done a good job of doing what he was asked to do in all levels of the 49ers organization. When he was asked to be a special teams guy, he was a special teams guy. When they asked him to, carry the load last year, he did that. So I understand that, the team wants to do right by him. Again, the timing was really weird. We're still on edge with George Kittle. I know that there was some Twitter scuttlebutt about it being a done deal already, but that hasn't panned out because this team doesn't leak anything. So all that stuff was probably garbage anyway. So you would expect that they would have done Kittle first. So what that tells me is that there's something here that was not only an incentive for Raheem Mostert and something that he wanted, to happen, but the team probably got something out of it too.
Yeah, I that's a great point because it definitely freed up something and allowed them to kind of have a little more flexibility to sign George Kittle to that long-term deal that everybody's been kind of anxiously waiting for. And I just want to read Raheem Mostert's agent's statement that he released today. Happy we got things worked out and looking forward to having him having another great season there. Thanks to our organization for taking care of him. So to me, we talked about this when this first was announced and Raheem Mostert's agent, Brett Tesler, first kind of publicly appealed to the fans, asking for, essentially the fans to shame the team into getting the deal for his client. And, we both agree that's kind of not the way they should have gone about it. And not only that, but it's a bad look. You're kind of using public opinion and the fans to shame the team, like I said, and you're kind of trying to guilt the team into it because the team is aware, even though they're not as active on social media when it comes to, replying to fans or liking tweets, they're on there. They see everything. So I'm sure Brett Tesler knew what he was doing when he kind of went out and said, you know what, after months of trying to get this deal done, they're just, giving my client crumbs. And after what he did, so he knew what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And to come out and say this statement here, we're glad the team was able to take care of my client. It pretty much just shows, it's all he knows. It's a game. He knows he was trying to play them. And it looks like they got what they wanted. I'm just hoping the 49ers are still able to get what they want out of this. And, at a certain point, production and, value, they don't necessarily keep increasing at the same rate. You can only pay a running back so much and then production doesn't keep continuing. So I don't think Raheem Mostert's at that point yet, but it'll be interesting to see what happens after this. And I know he didn't have – go ahead.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. And I think that the speculated upon incentives are going to be really interesting too, because I think that this is going to be one of those things where, again, the team is really good at setting up contracts, and it might be a thing of like, okay, well, you want extra money, you're going to have to earn it. So we'll put the bonuses in there for you, no problem. You're going to, maybe take a little off the top as far as what he's going to get guaranteed, and say, hey, if you average 5 yards a carry again, then you're going to get X, Y, Z. If you reach a certain yards milestone, you'll get this, and it's just, I think the team looked at it from like, well, you want your money and you think you're worth it. Well, then you're going to have to go out there and prove once again that what you did last year wasn't the outlier, wasn't the fluke, because again, you've been cut by 6 different NFL teams and, you've been all over the league and nobody has kept you. And now all of a sudden you do one thing and it's like the minute you get a taste, you just become obsessed with it. It's like, okay, well, I did this. So now I've earned X, Y, Z without having actually proven it over a sustainable level. You know, it's not like he's been 4 years of doing this and now it's time to pay him like you would have like with a rookie or something like that. You know, he's going to have to prove that last year was him in a nutshell and him in reality rather than, you know, Kyle Shanahan's scheme doing wonders for a guy that really was a journeyman.
If you had to speculate, and obviously there's 100% speculation here, what would this restructure look like?
It would probably be similar to, so maybe a little bit more upfront on like a bonus or something like that. So maybe a lot of it, you know, it's hard to even say without knowing the terms, but a certain percentage of it will be an upfront bonus for this season. They'd probably lower his base salary to compensate for that, but then also add in like an incentives for, you know, yards or yards per carry, or this, you know, percentage of snaps on offense, you know, kind of like how Richard Sherman has a very low base salary, but he has all these escalator clauses that once he reaches them, you know, he gets paid a lot more. And, you know, it's one of those, hey, I bet on myself kind of things. And I'd say that this is for the team to do this in the middle of a contract negotiation with a more important player, quite frankly, in George Kittle, tells me that there was some compromise on both ends, that they came together and said, hey, again, hey, we'll incentivize you to play your best football, but you're going to have to earn the money. If you think you're this guy, you're going to have to go out there and prove it. And
last time we talked about this, you brought up that list of Shanahan running backs, specifically Kyle Shanahan running backs that had tremendous success with Kyle Shanahan, and then either Shanahan left or the running backs left, and the production dropped off. So I think this is the best scenario for Mostert because he doesn't have to necessarily show his hand to the NFL. Say he were to get traded to a crappy team who's able to pay him the money and he has a bad year, and then he's kind of made out to look like a fool. But now in this case, he gets the money and he gets to stay in the perfect system for his traits and his skills. So it's almost like he can't really lose because he's going to get the money. And at the same time, he's able to pretty much, it's almost a guarantee he'll have similar production just based on the way this offensive system is set up. And not only that, but they traded away Matt Breida. They do have some young undrafted free agent running backs back there. McKinnon's coming back from injury. But I think this is, I mean, obviously it's the first time in his career he's going into the season as the number one back, and other guys have to take that spot from him as opposed to him having to take that from other guys. So that's also kind of an interesting thing to keep an eye on, his mentality, going from the underdog to now being the top dog, and people looking at him to, I'm coming for your spot. So that you know, it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and that's, you know, again, be careful. You know, we've seen what happens to the next anointed guy, and we've seen how the next anointed guy, like people like Matt Breida, people like Tevin Coleman, get lost in the shuffle when they're not doing their job right. How quickly did Matt Breida go from, you know, hey, he's the guy. We see him week 3 Cleveland running an 80-yard touchdown on a start, you know, and then he doesn't play, you know, one or two fumbles, and that just like that, he was in Shanahan's doghouse. You know, it's that quick. And now that the spotlight is on Mostert, he's got to be careful what he wished for, and he has to come out and prove that he can do it, you know, because if he can't, you mentioned undrafted guys. Listen, running backs are still very replaceable in this league. And if he doesn't show out and produce, he's going to be like those other guys and fall by the wayside. Just simple as that.
Yeah, definitely. Matt, does this show the 49ers? Does it kind of paint them in a bad light? And this is going to sound totally stupid for me, but when I saw this, the main quote that came into my mind is, "We don't negotiate with terrorists." And you know, the agent and Raheem Mostert are kind of
that's a little much. That's a little much, but yeah.
But do you think it paints a kind of you know, the line going forward to, if players act like this, they might get what they want?
It depends. It really depends on what the terms of the contract are. Because like I said, if it's one of those things where it's like, we'll give you a little more upfront money, but if you want to earn the rest of it, you got to earn it. You know, then that's, I don't think that puts the 49ers in a position of weakness. I think that makes them look very shrewd because it protects them. If Raheem Mostert comes out and shits the bed, then all of a sudden it's like, well, he's not getting that extra money. He's not getting those incentives. And maybe you potentially have a deal where he actually earns less than what he would have if he just kept the status quo. So we don't know until the terms come out. But like I said, I don't think the 49ers would have done this without some type of incentive for them to do it, something in it for them. You know, there's always that thing. They just didn't do this because they're these altruistic, you know, people, the GM and, you know, Parag Marathe and you know, John Lynch, these angels who just want to help everybody. That's not the way that it is. He's going to have to come and prove that he is the guy that he says that he is, you know, and sometimes by being your own advocate, you can become your own worst enemy if you hype yourself up too much. So he's got to avoid those pitfalls. He's still got to come in hungry. As far as I'm concerned, he could go from the guy to being out of here just like that. And we've seen it before. We've seen it in different situations. And don't forget that, you know, he has had injuries too. You know, he's broken a forearm. He's, you know, had little knickknacks here and there. He's had a fumbling problem. He needs to come in with his head right, and hopefully that this is something that says, hey, we've taken care of you. Come in, mind your P's and Q's, do your job, and I fully expect him to. I know he's a hard worker. Come in, do your job, and show out, and you'll get paid. So it's as simple as that. I don't think it makes the team look weak at all, though. Man, short term, the Seahawks got an excellent safety, but long term, they got fleeced. I mean, they gave up the farm, and I can't believe they gave up that much for a safety. I mean, we talked about last year how much Pittsburgh had to give up to get Minka Fitzpatrick from the Dolphins, and that trade looks like Pittsburgh swindled at this point. I mean, you're talking Jamal Adams for 2 firsts and a third. I mean, that is crazy. That I can't believe that. That almost makes the Nuke Hopkins trade look relatively okay. It doesn't. Well, it doesn't. But I'm just saying, like that's a lot. And I know Adams is that guy that, you know, they want at safety. By the way, don't forget about Bradley McDougall, who isn't exactly, you know, a practice squad player. He's not terrible. Not great, but he's not terrible. You got a guy in Adams that's, you know, he's a playmaker. He's a difference maker. I saw a stat where if Jamal Adams had his current sack total from last year, which was 6.5, and he was on the Seahawks, he would have led that team in sacks, you know, which is terrible. But you give up the farm for a safety. And I know people, and this bothers me the most, is when people online say, well, they're not good at picking first-round picks anyway. Okay, well, then trade them for second and third and fourth-round picks where you have had a pretty decent track record of picking up players. But you essentially mortgaged your future for now. And there's a lot of holes in that roster. I mean, for as much as you like, man, we got a great player in Jamal Adams back there at the safety position. What have you done to address the offensive line for Russell Wilson? What have you put behind him in the backfield that, you know, you had serious injuries to those running backs last year, and you don't know what you're going to get, you know? The receiver core is pretty good, but you don't really have a great tight end. Your defensive line, obviously, if Jamal Adams was going to lead the team with 6.5 sacks, defensive line is terrible. Not to, you know, mention that Clowney's now gone out in free agency. Who knows where he's going to end up, but it doesn't look like he's going to be back in Seattle. And this is a Seattle team that has a ton of holes. And, you know, some people will be out there saying like, oh, you know, they're going to compete. I guess if you consider 9-7 and a wild card and being out in the first round competing, fine. That's what you're going to do. But, you know, to all those people who are like, man, they won this trade or they have the best roster in the NFC. If you're saying that, shame on you, because they don't. You know, it's shocking, but they gave up way too much, in my opinion, even for a player as elite as Jamal Adams is.
Go off, Matt. Jesus Christ. That's awesome. I agree with you. They got robbed. The Jets took them for a ride, and they left them naked on the side of the road. I mean, they just completely took them for one. And I've seen people.
Well, just real quick, by the way, wasn't Jamal Adams just criticizing the Jets GM for not being able to do his job right and not being ready for that role? And then he turns around and ships him off and gets a king's ransom in return. Whoops. I mean, I agree with him on Adam Gase being a terrible head coach. That's fine. But, man, he went in on the general manager, and the general manager said, oh, hold my beer. It was crazy. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great point. He did, like, only a couple days before all this happened, too. But I've seen people on Twitter literally say this closes the gap between the 49ers and the Seahawks.
Absolutely not.
It brings the Seahawks.
Hell no. Hell no. No, it doesn't.
I can't agree more. There is a rather prominent Seattle Seahawks blogger. His handle's Evan in Seattle. And not to call anybody out specifically, but I just saw this tweet and I just think it's so atrocious. And I know he's trolling. But I just got to cover it. And he said here, he kind of gave out his predictions. And, Seattle's at the top, 12-4. Cardinals second, 10-6. Rams third, 8-8. And 49ers 7-9. And the stupidity here is just off the charts.
Who Evan in Seattle wrote that?
Yeah.
Evan in Seattle been drinking. Evan in Seattle need to go to sleep before he hits send on that tweet. He has to be trolling. That's just, come on. The Rams, come on.
Yeah.
That's, no.
There's doubt that he's trolling. But I even saw guys like, former 49ers beat reporter Joe Fan kind of tweeting out that it really, really narrows that gap. And I love Joe, but I disagree. I don't think one player has that big of an effect on the team. Like you were saying in your response, this team has so many holes that you plug one elite player. Yes, he's the best player at his position in the NFL, but that only does so much. There's not a quarterback
exactly
of the defense.
And I'd like to point out that, Russell Wilson will cover a lot of warts. He will cover a lot of warts. He's that good. But he's also starting to age. He's going to be 31, 32 this year. He's taken some poundings lately. He's not always going to – he's stayed relatively injury-free, which is awesome. But the corollary that I would like to draw is how often have we heard, man, if Aaron Rodgers just had a little bit more here or here or here, what could he have done? And I think it's a similar situation where Russell Wilson is so good at covering up the flaws that even the team is like, well, we can address that stuff later. And then before you know it, your team is full of holes, and all of a sudden Russell Wilson isn't able to carry you the way that he did before. You can talk about Jamal Adams being as good as you want, but I mean, for me, he's better at pass rushing than he is at coverage, even though he is a good cover guy. But they don't have any pass rush, so even if you have Jamal Adams back there, there's still going to be plenty of other, weapons that you have to account for. And somebody had said, oh, well, he's, they got him to stop George Kittle. Good luck. I mean, nobody else has been able to do it so far. So if that's what you did and you think that keeping up with the 49ers means, keeping up with Kittle, I mean, you got another thing coming. That's not going to be enough. This is not the Colin Kaepernick 49ers that couldn't seem to beat the Seahawks. This is an entirely different team. And if Seattle goes in there complacent thinking like, oh, this is the same old 49ers, then they're going to have a rude awakening this season, not to mention the Cardinals have gotten significantly better. And you're saying that Seattle is going to be first in the division, or Seattle has closed that gap? No way.
No way. I agree. I think it's 49ers, Arizona, Seattle, Rams. I think that's how it shapes up when it's all said and done. But we've talked about this, and you've said it yourself. Sure, you can double, triple team George Kittle, but then there's Debo. Then there's Brandon Ayuk. There are these other receivers, Kendrick Bourne, even, who knows what Dante Pettis, Trent Taylor, Jalen Hurts. There are all these other guys who can then get open. You can't double everyone. There's only so many guys on the field. So if you're getting, and, if they really did this to stop George Kittle, they mortgage their entire, immediate future to do this. And it's almost laughable because good luck. That's almost what I feel like saying. Good luck.
Yeah.
Sure, you can do that, but there's no guarantee it's going to work. Now, how much better does this make the Seahawks, being kind of unbiased here?
I mean, I think it improves the safety spot. Do I think Jamal Adams is an upgrade over McDougal? Yeah, a big upgrade. He's one of the top 3 safeties in the NFL. I would say is a fair, maybe Tyrann Mathieu, probably the best. People sleep on Keith Byard in Tennessee, but he's fantastic. You got a couple others out there. He's one of the best. But at the same time, Bobby Wagner's getting older. Maybe, you don't have a defensive line. You don't have an offensive line. At some point, you have to address these, these areas of need. And what do you usually do that with? Picks. Why are the New England Patriots the New England Patriots? because they always trade out of the first round and get second, third, and fourth round picks. Always. That's what they do. And that's why they were able to keep, to keep stockpiling talent, find all these guys that fit the mold, and to mortgage your future like that for the here and now. I mean, I know you said the Cardinals are probably the second best team in the division. I would argue that they're pretty close because the Cardinals still have a lot of holes too. But to say that they've closed the gap on the 49ers, I mean, that's crazy talk. And people, you want to sleep on Jimmy Garoppolo, that's fine. I know not everybody's going to, vibe with the NFL top 100. There's a lot of, but they have him, 43rd? Okay, so, I mean, people act like Jimmy Garoppolo is trash. He's definitely not trash. That's for sure. You got more weapons on the outside for him to find. You're going to have a ton of guys coming back from injury. The offensive line is top 10 offensive line in the NFL. The defensive line is the best defensive line in the NFL. The linebacking core, when everybody's healthy, is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, the secondary is maybe the one weak spot, if you want to call it that. But when your pass rush is so good, how weak is it? I mean, because the safety tandem of Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tartt, I mean, I'd put that up there with any other group. So tell me where Seattle can. I mean, if all we're talking about is two players, Russell Wilson and Jamal Adams, and that closes the gap, yeah, sure thing, buddy.
All right, guys, I think we'll end it there. And for the record, Matt, I also did kind of say they're poor at drafting, so it's not that bad. I said it's two Rashad Pennies, kind of jokingly, but I understand.
Sure, or it could be 3 or 4 Shaq Griffins.
Yep, they can flip those picks. Other teams aren't bad at drafting first rounders.
Exactly. Well, listen, Nick Bosa notwithstanding, look at some of the players that are here on the Fred Warner, 3rd round pick.
Yep, George Kittle,
5th round pick. So you're talking about some of the best players in the NFL that you can find in the middle rounds, and they gave it up for a guy for a splash. Okay, well, good luck when that splash backfires in 2 years. Oh, by the way, they still have to pay him.
Yep. Matt, do you agree with this or disagree with it?
I find it hard to argue. Bosa is amazing, but it's one of those situations where you're running up against the quarterback position, and having seen Kyler Murray a couple times last year, and having watched some tape on him, the kid is going to be special. He's going to be really, really good. So it's quibbling. You could probably swap them back and forth, but I'm not going to be too mad about it. There's something about Kyler, the ball just flies out of his hands. He's going to be a really good quarterback. And quarterback's the premium position. So what are you going to do? That being said, I mean, second is nothing to sneeze at for Nick Bosa. So, it's kind of like Kyler Murray was drafted 1, Nick Bosa was drafted 2. They're both their rookie of the year on each side of the ball, pretty interchangeable. But, I can't complain about it. Nick Bosa is fantastic. I think he's going to be an anchor of this defense for years to come. I expect him to do even more, especially with hopefully a healthy D Ford coming back. And then you have Javon Kinlaw, and we're going to see what he can do. We have Ronald Blair and DJ Jones coming back from injury. The line is stacked. And the less that the defense can focus on Bosa, the more that helps him. And even if they do focus on Bosa, they're going to learn real quick that everybody else is going to eat too. So, it's a pick your poison kind of thing. And Bosa, to me, is just from a technique standpoint, he's so polished. And that's the thing that stands out about him. Yeah, he's an athlete, and, he's strong, and he's pretty quick. He's a good athlete, elite hip bend, but his hands are just out of this world as far as his technique goes. So, it's good to see him getting recognized. And I can't say that I disagree with the list.
It's hard to disagree with, like you said, because you're going up against the premium position in a quarterback. And not only that, but Kyler Murray was phenomenal last year. We saw him do some things that were just breathtaking. He's extremely elusive. He's got a hell of an arm. He's accurate. He's accurate on the run. The guy's got a great career. And, I'll admittedly say I didn't know much about him coming out of college. I thought the Cardinals were dumb for passing up on Nick Bosa, but mainly because I was a big fan of Josh Rosen. And, I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding now. They made the right choice in passing up on Nick Bosa to get Kyler Murray, and it worked out for the 49ers too, so I'm extremely happy with it. But go ahead.
It's one of those things that's just like, again, like you said, premium position. He did a great job last year in a first year system. He actually improved after the Dolphins traded Kenyon Drake to the Arizona Cardinals. And now coming into this season, he gets DeAndre Hopkins, which, I mean, Kyler Murray is about to take the next quantum leap forward. And like you said, its proof was that Josh Rosen wasn't the guy. And I really feel bad for Josh Rosen because he hasn't gotten a fair shake, but that's neither here nor there. I think he should be in New England and have Belichick groom him a little bit. I think that would be the best for him. But, with all that being said, it is a premium position. So, again, like you said, can't really argue with it,
Now, looking at some of the other guys on this list, particularly number 3, Josh Allen of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Going into that draft, there were a lot of people kind of hyping up Josh Allen, saying the 49ers take him. What's that?
Like me. I love Josh Allen.
Yeah. Would he be number 2 if the 49ers took him instead of Nick Bosa, just due to this defensive line, or do you think no?
That's a really hard thing to say. I don't think they're necessarily interchangeable. Where I think Josh Allen excels is from a pure just speed and athleticism advantage. We had some guys that we know who shall remain nameless, Scott, who didn't like Josh Allen, who didn't think that his speed to power would transfer in the NFL. That was proven wrong. It did, and he's a phenomenal player. To say things happen the way they happen, so to say he would be fantastic here, I don't know. I don't know if he would be the type of guy that the 49ers needed. His upside might be a little bit higher than Nick Bosa, but that's because Nick Bosa is such a polished prospect, such a polished player already, that it's hard to fathom how much better you can get. You know what I mean? But if you're talking about a guy who has opportunity to get, be a double-digit sack guy for 10 years, then, I mean, well, how much higher do you need the ceiling, So I agree with Josh Allen being 3rd. I think he's phenomenal, and he did a lot of it with I don't know if many people know this who, don't follow Jacksonville or whatever. He had a broken hand like early in the season. So he's playing, one hand down. It was in a cast, and he was still able to get, I think he had 10 sacks on the season, 10 and a half. Had a great rookie season. Wasn't quite as dynamic or eye-popping as Nick Bosa was. I mean, Nick Bosa always seemed to be in the highlights between planting the flag and, the insane game that he had against the Carolina Panthers, which pretty much summed up Rookie of the Year for him, or the slide against Washington in the rain. There was just so many Nick Bosa highlights that it was hard to deny. But, in Jacksonville, I mean, Josh Allen made a name for himself.
Yeah, I think the Jaguars are happy with who they got. But Nick Bosa, like you said, so many signature moments for him in his rookie year. Do you think that that's kind of hard for him to follow up with? We talk about sophomore slumps with guys like Debo and Dante Pettis. What about a defensive lineman like Nick Bosa?
No. If he's healthy, if he stays healthy, and they, again, like I said, if they get a healthy D Ford back, and, they still have Kinlaw, they still have Armstead, and you get guys coming back through the rotation, you're not going to be able to concentrate. I saw Nick Bosa get held 7 ways from Sunday last year. And, a lot of times he would get some calls, but a lot of times he wouldn't. And I think part of that is you have to establish yourself, in the NFL. And it's the same thing. People talk and you get the superstar calls. Nick Bosa is going to start getting those superstar calls, and defenses or offenses are going to have to change the way that they block him. It's not going to be as easy. You can't hold him all the time. In the Super Bowl, I mean, he essentially got tackled multiple times. Around the neck, no calls. So this season, I expect that to start to change a little bit, and I wouldn't be surprised if, again, he's just one of those guys that's 10 to 15 sacks every single year, like clockwork.
Thinking of one play in particular is that play where he got Taysom Hill in the backfield while getting held. He luckily did get the call that time. If that doesn't show his just sheer strength and athleticism, I don't know what does, because that's just a perfect example of what Nick Bosa can do, while getting held, still makes the play in the backfield for a loss. He's just a hell of a player. Now, Matt, do you think that this team has so many talented players on that defensive line as it is? He's got to be the best player on that defense, right?
On the entire defense or just on the defensive line?
On the whole defense.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, yeah, you kind of gotta think that he is, right? I mean, well, it's really close between him and a guy that nobody talks about around the league, and that's Fred Warner, who I think is just phenomenal. But that'd be like 1 and 2, you know. I think Sherman's the most intelligent player on the defense. He's got that veteran advantage, but I just don't think that he has, you know, his athleticism is waning a little bit, so I don't think he's quite that player anymore. Yeah. I mean, you think from pure talent and knowledge and technique standpoint, Bosa's got to be right there.
I don't understand, or I understand what you're saying with Fred Warner, possibly even Sherman, but Nick Bosa, the potential for him, man, is phenomenal. He could be one of the greatest defensive players ever if he just continues the path that he's on. And, you know, obviously barring any injuries, but the guy, he came in extremely polished, ready to go day one, and he lit up the NFL like, you know, very, very few rookies have. And I'm extremely excited to see what he has in his sophomore campaign, because I think he could really build on it. Do you think there are certain things you're still looking to see from him, or has he shown a little bit of it all to where you just want to see him kind of keep par?
Yeah, there are a couple things. One, I think that he needs to work a little bit on his recognition in RPO situations. Sometimes he crashes too hard. Sometimes he, you know, settles too much. The other area where I think that he needs to work on a little bit is finishing. Sometimes he will overrun a play as far as, you know, hey, got a hand on somebody, but he missed, you know what I mean? And that's not to say he doesn't hustle, because he absolutely does. And he makes things happen. You know, you'll find him down the field. I'm saying on that initial move, there are times when he's had the quarterback dead to rights and the quarterback has made a last minute move and he couldn't adjust. So you'd like to see a little bit more recognition in those things, but that comes with experience in the NFL. You know, it's about, okay, you know, the left tackle is going to try to leverage me, you know, this way. I need to be able to counter that this way, you know, and it's just experience and a little bit of, you know, getting out there and, you know, recognizing. And, you know, they say, you know, the game slows down for the elite players, you know, and it's not just quarterbacks. It's going to be everybody. The more you recognize, the easier it is. It becomes second nature. It becomes muscle memory. And so the more Nick Bosa goes along, the easier it's going to be for him, and he's not going to have to think about it. And I think that that's something, especially with those RPO style plays, that you caught him thinking about things sometimes. And so if he can make that more of a reactionary thing and bred into himself as far as a player goes, he's going to be that much better for it.
All right, guys, let's hope we see it. I think we'll wrap it up there. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. Our handles are below on the screen. And make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment below. How much better can Nick Bosa get? How many sacks do you think he'll have next year? And subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this.
Go ahead and click the bell for notifications. We're always bringing you great 49ers content.
Thanks, guys.
Go Niners.